Welcome everyone to the Overview and Scrutiny Board. First of all, I would like to ask our Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping notice.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum. Mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, apologies for absence. We'll note that Councillor Bartlett is unable to be here in person, but he is here with us on Teams. And also Councillor Rice. Are there any other apologies?
No further apologies, Chair, and no substitute members.
Okay, do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda today? Okay, so we're on to public issues. So we have had one public statement from Adam Sofianos on the subject of agenda item 7, and this will be read out in his absence.
Thank you, Chair. It's heartening to see Council addressing issues in the complaints service. However, I wonder if the extent of these issues are clear. In May 2022, I registered a formal complaint around the Jesmond Wood saga. The Council took 2 years and 2 months to provide a Stage 1 response. This staggering delay came despite over 30 chasing emails direct to officers, including the Chief Executive, despite meetings with the former Head of Planning and former Monitoring Officer, and despite consistent support from Ward Councillor Andy Martin. I could go on, but in short, this appalling experience was only ended when the current Monitoring Officer arrived and I appealed directly to her. The issues are far greater than simply inconsistency between departments. I urge the Council to turn over every stone and consider every avenue in its review of the complaints service. The public interest must come first.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Sofianos, for your contribution to the committee. It's always a good thing when people from the public are interested in contributing to the work we do at the Council. So I'm going to suggest that we bring item 7, centralisation of complaints, forward. That is the item that we've just heard from the member of public on, but also our cabinet member Andy Martin needs to go and can't stay for the whole meeting. So is everyone agreed that we bring that item forward and take it now? Okay. So, Councillor Martin, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you very much, Chair, and also thank you to the committee for not objecting to me going first, and also thanks to my cabinet colleagues and the leader behind me for allowing me to bump myself out the order. Obviously with me is Matthew Rowsett, Head of Customer Property, and also Jane Potter is on the line, who is Head of Business Services. So I'd like to just make a few general remarks about customer and complaints. Obviously both come under my portfolio. And then I would like to, with your indulgence, go through a few of the bullet points in the report, and then hopefully hand over to Matty for any questions or any more of the detail that members might wish to dig into. So first of all, I think it's obviously fair to say that we are all around this table in this room. We're all customers of something, of someone, of some organisation, and no doubt we've all complained over the years. And so we all know individually from our own personal experience what good, bad, and ugly looks like in terms of complaints. And I think we can probably all agree that the handling of complaints, or the correct handling of complaints, is one of the most fundamental things that any organisation and important things that any organisation must do. When people complain, they are worried, inconvenienced, frustrated, angry, or perhaps even in crisis, or indeed perhaps even a combination of all these things. In local government, residents have no choice other than to be our customers, unless of course they move out of the area. So I think it's even more important when customers don't have a choice about who they are customers of, as in local government or other public organisations. It's even more imperative to get that right. And of course, the way complaints are handled and the way that they are learnt from is a huge factor in the reputation of any organisation, and I would suggest that the reputation of BCP very much hinges on how we deal with complaints for a lot of our residents, and I think that's absolutely fundamental. I think you'll be hearing a little bit about transformation later, and then the transformation paper coming to Cabinet in due course. And I think one thing I would say is the transformation journey in this council has been going on for 5 years, and it would have been great if we had been further along the line with the centralisation of complaints in terms of what is trying to be achieved here. But we are where we are, and there are many reasons why not everything has been transformed as fast as we would have wanted it, and to the extent that we would have wanted it. I just want to give a personal example of complaints, and indeed what is a complaint, and when is a complaint a complaint, and when is it just a request for help. And it's a personal example to my ward. So last year I dealt with somewhere between 60 and 70 complaints about uncollected food waste bins. I know that may be replicated amongst other wards in Christchurch and what have you, but I was quite surprised about the level of complaints, and I did encourage people to make a formal complaint so that it was registered, but I think most of them just thought I would deal with it, and in most examples I did, but it did make me wonder about what the perception of our customer service and our complaint system was amongst the residents who had that experience, and some of them had it several times. So somebody would contact me about an uncollected food bin 1 week, and then they come back a month later and say it's happened again. So it did focus on me. Why does this sort of thing continually happen? How are we dealing with people in that kind of with those complaints? And what can we do to improve that? That's about service improvement, but it may also be about improving the complaints system. So there's just a few introductory remarks. So let me just talk you through a few bullet points about the report itself, and hopefully members will have read it all anyway. But so currently there are various ways that complaints are handled across the council, and that represents an inconsistency with what we're doing, and of course it means that customers may be experiencing or will experience have different experiences depending on which service they are contacting, and the quality of complaint handling may be variable. And of course I'm not going to pick out any departments in particular, but obviously there are some departments who are, partly because of the services they operate, are perhaps better than others. Customers will have a variable experience. It's also not easy to see complaints at an organisational level, as they are managed in different systems according to different policies. This means we may not be learning as much as we could be to avoid repeated issues arising again and again. Now that takes me back to my example of the food waste thing, but there are probably lots of other examples as well. I think it's important to stress that we have pockets of very effective complaints management across the organisation, which obviously we want to build on and become the norm across BCP. I can see Jane nodding there, so I think the oversight of complaints being managed outside services themselves is something the local government ombudsman has recommended and which we are aiming to achieve through the changes we're making. And I should stress that the ombudsman didn't just recommend that for BCP Council, he recommended it across local government in general. So just important to make that point, I think. So the key elements of our new approach will be, number one, a centralised complaints team providing guidance and policy to underpin consistency and quality. Number two, a centralised complaints case management system that allows a single view of customer complaints regardless of which service the complaint relates to. Number three, a standardisation of policies, procedures and processes. Number four, ensuring feedback and organisational learning is gathered from the complaints that we receive. I think that's really critical as well. And number five, using artificial intelligence to analyse complaints and inform priorities for improvement. So the progress so far, complaint specialists are gradually being integrated into a central team to develop policy and drive consistency. Charters are in place or in development with services which describe what services can expect from the centralised service. Then the requirements for a case management system have been identified, and the work to deliver the new system is scheduled with ICT to begin in August. So obviously some way off, and launch is expected in April 2026. We are working with the Ombudsman to ensure the development of our new approach is consistent with their emerging guidance, or the Office of the Ombudsman. And the Ombudsman's new code expects councils to have a lead member for complaints, a role which I have agreed to perform in BCP Council. So, in summary, we have made progress, but there is clearly more to do. That will be obvious to everybody. The introduction of the new case management system will take time, as it will need to integrate into existing council systems to work more effectively. So again, back to our transformation agenda. In the meantime, the creation of a centralised team and a single policy approach to complaints management will continue and will ensure that we bring about tangible improvements as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair. I hope that is a helpful introduction. Happy to take any questions, and I know Jane and Matty will do as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, who has questions? Councillor Northover.
Thank you. I just wondered, can I direct the question straight to you? So with the new system, would you be, if you were an officer and somebody emails you with a complaint, would you be required to put it into the specific system so that every single complaint is always recognised and that we always know that there's a complaint?
I'm going to ask Matthew to deal with that one.
So simple answer is yes. The idea is that we have a single case management system that gathers all information about complaints, so irrespective of which department they're sent to, so that we can have a clearer view of an individual's experience, because they might have made complaints to a number of different departments, and that can obviously, if they get then dealt with in a very different way, that can be frustrating and not very helpful to them. And the complaints might be connected in some way, some other way. So yes, that's what the system will do, and staff in all the different departments will have access to that system to be able to record the complaints they're receiving.
A requirement that they must always, a bit like if we get an FOI request, we have to quickly send it to the FOI people, and we have to do that. It's not like you can choose to and make use of it if you want. You actually have to. So would it be like that?
Yes, and each sort of department will have their own complaints lead, which will be responsible for encouraging that behaviour. So at the moment, whilst we might we might tell you how many complaints we have in services or the council. The reality is it's difficult to give any certainty to that because we don't collect them in one place. Some services have quite relatively sophisticated systems for recording complaints and others don't, and some have staff that just deal with complaints and others don't. So at the moment I think our overall the overall intelligence we get from the system isn't as good as it needs to be. So what you've described is what would happen.
Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's at point 15 on the report that I don't quite understand the wording. If it's going to be centralised, which we're saying, existing staff resources within service areas will continue to respond to complaints about their specific service area, but oversight, guidance, monitoring will be centralised. So surely that isn't centralised, is it? You're just reporting it, as you say. You're not, the central person doesn't deal with the complaint, or am I misreading that? Clearly I am.
That's fine.
Do you want me to answer that, Matthew?
Yeah, go on then, Jane.
It's a hybrid. So with all of the main statutory service areas, those staff are centralising. So adult social care, planning, and children's services are coming next. They'll be with us in April. All of those services have officers that specifically specialise in complaints work. So they're coming across, and all of those complaints will be dealt with centrally, not just monitored, but also handled. I mean, the services will always be asked to respond to stage 1s and stage 2s, but the monitoring process will happen centrally. So central complaints is a monitoring process and a guidance process. We do not have the resources to respond. You may recall originally that 3 years ago there was a report to Cabinet that suggested that the council bring in a number of independent investigators to investigate every complaint in the council. That wasn't popular because the services themselves understand their services extremely well, and they're the best people to investigate at stage 1. Some of our stage 2s and stage 3s are independent, and that assessment is made by the central service. So it's a hybrid model where we will have a single monitoring system. We will monitor, the ticking clock will happen immediately. The standard of those responses will be monitored, but we as a central single complaint service will only be closely aligned and supporting the statutory areas and working alongside all the other staff. There are lots of them that they don't have complaints as a single role within their service, but it's part of their job. So we will be monitoring and supporting those staff, but those staff won't be centralised. Does that explain it?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It does, and I was thinking of adult social care anyway. So
yeah, they're in. So they're centralised,
yeah,
and
yeah.
We've got a charter in place, and we have a service manager within adult social care who monitors our performance on a monthly basis. So far, so good. They've been in for 6 months, and the service is pleased with the way we're delivering support back to adult social care. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really welcome this report, and I have to say it's been on Overview and Scrutiny Board's radar for a long time, and it's a shame it's really taken so long to come to fruition. But nevertheless, and I understand there's been a lot of work going on with transformation, etc., during that period. But it started, so I really welcome that. Of course, complaints have always been directed from the public to the council's website, but of course then it's gone out to the various service units. And unfortunately, it's not been possible necessarily to track it in a single place, as has been highlighted, because, you know, the complaints really, it produces real value for the council, not just in enabling it to improve its services, but and improve its reputation in particular, but more so in the way the council performs. And we all can remember the best value notice that we got, etc., etc. The way we drive up performance is absolutely critical. And where we really do have to improve our performance is in the way that we respond to our customers, our residents. And this is still a bit of a weakness, and we're nowhere near it in terms of the transformation program, which we'll be talking about later on. But yeah, really good. Really looking forward to this coming on. I wish everybody luck with it, and we look forward to seeing the service being implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got three quick questions, and it will be quick. So the first one, like Councillor Bartlett, I really welcome this paper. This, as Councillor Bartlett said, it's been a long time coming. We kicked this off a number of years ago, not least because of recommendations from the Ombudsman. So it's good to see that it's finally coming together, and it's impossible not to welcome it. I just got, the first question is about timing. So the reason we put this in place back in 2022 was responding to those recommendations around consistency, and the deadline was April 2026. This paper seemed to suggest that the aim is for it to go live in April 2026. So it seems a bit tight to me. So I just wonder what confidence we have that we are going to hit that deadline, because as the paper says, there's an awful lot of other stuff going on. It seems that this has been pushed towards the back of the programme. Thank you. That's the first question.
Matthew, are you happy for me to answer that?
Yeah, go on then, Jane. Go on.
I'll try. So the bit that is last, we're ready for the centralised database. We've done all the background work on it, but IT have a huge transformation programme that they're leading with very limited resources. So unfortunately, they've had to push us back 6 months in that centralised database process. So due to no fault of their own, just the huge size of the transformation programme, it's that piece that comes last. So we are still operating manually this year because we won't have the centralised database, but all the work to create the database, you know, to map out what we require, to map out the resources, it is all done. The pieces of work that are left from me and the team to do are to carry on with this centralisation process, as we've said in the report. That's people and ensuring that we have the single centralised policies in place, and to make sure that we get back out there and help everyone understand the difference between a complaint and a service request. Because what we're seeing in the mapping that we're doing so far is that we think a significant number of complaints in certain areas shouldn't be categorised as complaints. They should be categorised as a service request. And the Ombudsman is really clear about that definition. A service request is a request that BCP Council provides or improves a service or fixes a problem or reconsiders a decision. That's a service request, not a complaint. And we're back out early this year, making sure everybody understands the difference between a service request and a complaint, so that we categorise them properly. And in our new database, we will have a category for service requests, a category for complaints, and a category for compliments. And our senior staff will all have access to those windscreens, so they can have a look at the performance of the entire council or their individual services as we move forward.
Okay, any more? Yes. Oh, yes. You've got 2 more questions.
A few more. Yeah. So I mean, first of all, it is just a bit disappointing that the very last thing on the transformation programme is a reform of the complaints process. But I understand that we are where we are on that. But I think we should say that, you know, you would have hoped that that would be higher up in the agenda. But I'll park that. Chair, my second question has been brilliantly answered actually by Jane, because it was about that difference between what is a complaint and what is a service request. Because I was a little bit concerned when the cabinet member pointed out that a missed bin collection was a complaint. That's not how I see it. That would be a service request, and I would have thought that it would take up an awful lot of time. I can get it when it's repeat and it happens again and again and again, but if everybody that had a missed bin collection was making a formal complaint, then this would be overloaded. So I was going to ask about how that signposting was going to happen, but I think it's really brilliant to hear that there's going to be an option for, do you want to make a formal complaint, or do you want something to happen? And actually, I think that might make the system much more robust as well. I think much more effective, actually, because most people want something to happen, and I think that will probably push them towards something happening rather than a complaint, which is normally when things go systematically wrong. So that has been answered. So the final question, slightly tongue-in-cheek, is to the portfolio holder. What have you done to upset the leader so much that you're now the lead member for complaints? You don't have to answer that one.
No, I'll decline that one if I may. But I would just, and you did sort of refer to it when I was talking about the food waste bins. When somebody contacted me the first time and the second time, I took that as a request for a service or request for help. When it was the third and fourth time, that's when it becomes, in my view, a cause for complaint, and quite rightly so. But you did point that out, but I just wanted to clarify that. And actually, I would say, obviously, as lead member for complaints, if any members around the table have any complaints about the progress of the complaints procedure, they can complain to me. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions? Councillor Goodall.
Yeah, just a quickie, really. It's from personal experience. I just wonder when service requests can, in their turn, lead to complaints, because officers. This doesn't apply to all departments, but officers don't give policy answers when there is a service request. So, in other words, somebody says you can't have a parking. Residence parking, and it says it is and it says it's council policy. So you go back to the officer and you say, what's the policy? And then it doesn't, it's the answer is not forthcoming. And so you're going back to your resident constantly saying, so there's two issues here. One is the question about the service request eventually becoming a complaint because you can't get an answer. And I've completely forgotten what the point was. But
I mean, what we're doing is we're following the Ombudsman guidance on service requests, because it's a national problem. The way that some councils misinterpret complaints and service requests. So we're preparing guidance on that now, and there will be a ticking clock on the response and monitoring in the same way that there is for a complaint. So hopefully, as we move forward now and we clearly define service requests, and we've got that parameter for monitoring those service requests, we should be able to get clearer responses, and officers should treat them in a similar way to a complaint, in that they have a time window in which they need to respond.
thank you. Can I just ask a supplementary in the sense, so when that happens and there's an issue of policy coming through and a resident has a query on policy, and then you look it up on the website and you can't find it for love nor money, will that be dealt with at the same time as a complaint or a service request? I mean, in other words, will something go up on the website because you've solved that problem? It can go up on the website, and a resident then can find what they were looking for in the first place. Hence the query.
Absolutely, and we're linking that to Copilot AI, so that it can do those searches for us to make sure that whenever we're responding, whether it's an FOI, because I look after governance for children's services as well, so and we're trialling this with them, that we map any published information in our responses, so that we make sure we do that every time, and that if a published response isn't available, we'll make sure there is one available in the future. And we'll publish that on our website. So we're trying to close all of the loopholes that are there at the moment, as we move through this development phase of complaints.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Only on the basis that I'm the last speaker, so I didn't want to cut into anybody else. Was all.
I did actually want to ask you a question as well.
Okay.
If you want to go after this, it may not be a question for you. It may be for the officers. So I've noticed in number 18, you've completed. We've completed the development of the requirements for the management for the system. So I just wanted to ask, have the people who are working on complaints at the moment been involved with developing those requirements? And what's happening between now and August when they start doing the build?
Chair, just if I jump in on that one, I think first answer to the question is yes. Those that have been involved in managing complaints across the organisation have been engaged to come up with the most appropriate specification for the system. And in terms of what happens between now and August, whilst we've done all the work to identify the requirements, there's obviously lots of other competing priorities for the developers' time. So I think it's simply a matter of being able to complete IT colleagues to be able to complete work they're already engaged in before they can then properly get involved in this piece of work. And rather than give ourselves a date that was never going to be achievable, this has been informed by the wider workload of the IT development team.
Okay.
Yeah, and also we've got we're working with legal on our UPC policy to bring that in and put that into the new central complaints policy because it didn't exist before. And we want a ticking time clock in the system on UPC characteristics, so that persistent complainants I'm talking about, so that wherever they are across the authority. At the moment, there is a scattergun approach sometimes with some of these complainants, and we can't easily see that they are accessing multiple areas of the service at the same time and complaining about very similar things. That UPC policy piece is going to have a monitoring element in the new database, so that if somebody displays a UPC characteristic, then that will be a mark against a particular complaint that they've made. If they reach a certain level of UPC score, then they would go in front of a panel to consider whether they should be categorised as UPC or not, because that panel at the moment doesn't exist. And it's something I've asked our legal colleagues to support me in developing as for me as the kind of new lead in complaints. So I hope that answers that question. That's the last bit that needs to go into the new database.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Martin, you wanted to come back.
I just wanted to say it was remiss of me earlier not to thank Matty and Jane and her team and the team for all their work on this. As we all acknowledge, we're not able to go as fast as we want to, but a lot of work has been done, and I'm grateful for everything that is being done. And no doubt we'll come back with an update at some point in the next few months. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me. Thank you very
much. I would like to propose that we note this, the progress that's been made. Is that agreed? Okay. Okay. So now we are on to transformation programme completion report, and I believe Councillor Hannah is going to introduce that for us.
And thank you, Chair. The main purpose of this report in terms of Cabinet decision making is to recognise that the original transformation programme established after the formation of the Council in 2019 is coming to an end at the end of March. And to note that in terms of continuing work, oversight at officer level will no longer be through the Transformation Board, but it will instead be through the Corporate Strategy Board. The report does recognise that there is more work to be done, not least securing the equal pay structure that our pay and reward programme is seeking to achieve, but also continuing work on the use of our physical assets, the various council buildings where some further rationalisation of use is achievable, and where the opportunity for creating hubs for a number of services is being explored. And we're working on further improvements to the council chamber and committee rooms, working with civic working with the Civic Members Working Group. And there is ongoing work on our digital strategy, our use of data and insight, and of new and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. All of these will in future come under the Corporate Strategy Board, chaired by the Chief Executive, whose composition is set out in paragraph 36. The report also summarises the main achievements in terms of savings, efficiencies, and modern ways of working that the transformation programme has delivered in the past 5 years. Millions of pounds of savings, better and more efficient ways of working, and modern digital services are just some of those achievements. By the end of this financial year, £41 million in estimated one-off investment will have generated a total net revenue savings of 35 million. Then, every year thereafter, there will be a minimum net annual revenue saving of £21 million, subject to a further one-off investment of up to 9 million in 25-26. Over the next 5 years, that equates to additional savings of over £100 million, which seems a not unreasonable payback for the investment involved. As it happens, the leader mentioned in a meeting this morning another event that she had attended where the challenge was made to representatives of a number of councils to name just one example where a merger of councils had led to savings. In the face of cynicism within the local government family, she was able to cite ourselves, and we can take some pride in that. The savings are set out in paragraphs 6 and 7, with further detail in the appendices. The critical achievement, however, is that the transformation programme has helped to create a single unifying culture and way of working for BCP Council, following its formation from the 4 former councils. That was never going to be easy, and it is a tribute to our staff that it has largely been achieved. Instead of 4 diverse systems, the Council now has a new operating model, upgraded technology and digital infrastructure, which have revolutionised how the Council works. The upgrading of the Council-wide IT infrastructure has enabled the organisation to combine legacy systems and processes, including a Dynamics finance and operations platform that integrates finance, HR and procurement data in one location, allowing staff to self-serve efficiently. Further detail on the developments in IT is set out in paragraphs 12 to 18. Our use of physical buildings has been reviewed, with a single modernised civic centre being fashioned in the Bournemouth Town Hall complex. Further information on our estates and accommodation strategy is set out in paragraphs 20 to 24, including reference to the rollout of some 5,000 laptops and tablets to support flexible staff working. I won't comment in any detail on the continuing negotiations towards the implementation of pay and reward, since this was subject to scrutiny by the board in December. But I do want to recognise the ongoing work undertaken by our People and Culture Directorate on our people strategy, as set out in paragraphs 27 to 31 of the report. All of this has been achieved in difficult financial circumstances and with the added complexities of living through the pandemic and the additional pressures that that created. May I therefore express appreciation to all of the staff who have worked on the transformation programme, in particular the directors I've worked with since taking on this portfolio in 2023, Katie Lacey, the then director, and Sarah Chamberlain, the current director, who is online and ready to answer your questions this evening. Sarah Dean, the Director of People and Culture, and Matti Rodsep, the Director of Customer and Property Operations. May I also express thanks to the members of the Transformation Working Group who have undertaken deep dives into the various aspects of the programme and have provided a combination of interest, support and challenge in the process. The intention is that the working group will continue to meet to monitor the ongoing work. Lastly, may I refer to Councillor Bartlett's comments made in past meetings as Chair of the Board that we need to help residents understand all that has been achieved. Much of the work that has been undertaken is relatively invisible to residents. You will have noticed the introduction of Dynamics Finance and Operations. More will be aware of the modernisation of our council buildings, though I suspect still a minority of residents. Many of the improvements have been incremental, such as the merger of websites into one improved site, and so there will not have been a single point in time where residents will have picked up on a dramatic change. That is not to understate what has been achieved, but to acknowledge its nature. As some members of the board will be aware, we attempted to highlight the savings that have been achieved through a press release to the Echo. It was noticeable that many of the online comments were cynical, unfairly so, precisely for the reasons I have just outlined, and because the savings achieved through the programme have been dwarfed by the financial challenges faced by the council, and so have not led to an increase in services to residents, but have rather simply helped us avoid even worse reductions in service than might otherwise have been the case. We may not expect letters of congratulations from residents to flood in by the bagful, but that does not diminish all that has been achieved, and I would again express gratitude to all the officers involved. Thank you.
Thank you. So, questions for Councillor Hannah or officers? Or any statements anyone wishes to make? Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I just echo portfolio holders' comments regarding our thanks to the project director and lead, Sarah Chamberlain, and of course to all the other people that have been involved in this programme, not just at the moment, but those that have preceded, because over the 5 years, there's been a huge number of people on this programme. This programme was extremely ambitious, and in particular, we shouldn't forget that prior to the transformation programme, we had a programme of shared services between Bournemouth and Poole councils, where a lot of the work that we intended to do in transformation actually occurred before the transformation programme started. So, you know, it was squeezing the lemon to get the last drop out, even from year one of the programme. So to actually come through those 5 years and still end up with the savings and efficiencies that we have is frankly remarkable. And although we're not there yet, and there's a little time to go, as Councillor Hannah says, we shouldn't underestimate the achievement that has been made. The financial results speak for themselves. The savings are huge. Okay, it's a large investment, but the year-on-year savings are massive. And, you know, I have to say I was probably a bit cynical at the beginning of all this, but, you know, the evidence is in the figures. And, you know, I'm really grateful to Sarah and the team for producing this outstanding result. When we started the transformation programme, it was hoped, as Councillor Hannah said, that we would end up being so efficient we could actually improve our services. We could actually give more to our residents. Unfortunately, you know, everything conspired against us, didn't it? You know, with the cost of living crisis, the government policies on tax and all these sort of things have made it really, really very difficult. So we've been sort of swimming upstream against the tide of things going against us all the time. But nevertheless, we've been able to hold our position in the water, and still achieve remarkable results from this programme. So having said all that, I've got a couple of questions. I hope you don't mind. The first one is, most of the savings will have been accommodated through staff reductions. You know, we improve the way that we work, the efficiency at which we work. And I'm interested to find out how many staff have been made redundant through the programme in order to produce the savings that we've got. Now, I did a quick fag packet calculation this afternoon to see if I could sort of work it out myself, and I sort of came up with a figure of about a 5% reduction. Now, I don't know if that could be wildly wrong. I don't know, but I realise, of course, that we're not quite at the end of that staff reduction. There is more to come. I know we've got the voluntary redundancy programme, but I just wondered what that figure might be in terms of the number of staff reduced. A second question was on Appendix 2. It talks about the economic development area producing an efficiency of £655,000 per year, and it's being achieved by ensuring we get full cost recovery. I guess for that service, and I just that was news to me. I don't know how that's being achieved. I wonder if somebody could explain that to me. But that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may, I'm going to leave it to officers to provide the detailed answer on those questions. But in terms of staff made redundant, could I just draw the distinction between positions that may have been lost and actual redundancies? But I wonder which officer might be able to help with a figure or two.
I'm hoping Adam can on the financials, please. Thank you, Adam.
With regards to the headcount reduction, I don't think anywhere we've actually ever tallied that all up with regards to direct headcounts, regards to transformation, because a lot of the savings that have been delivered at a staff base, we've tried to be proactive around the delivery of those savings. So, delivering and offering up vacant posts as they become available rather than making somebody redundant. Clearly, with regards to redundancies, as a transparent organisation, we make that information available every year as part of our statement of accounts. But we've, to answer Councillor Bartlett's question, I don't think we've been through this list and tried to work out exactly the number of staff that have been made redundant as a direct result of the transformation programme. With regards to the second question, if I may, when we looked at the budget for what was it? What area of budget were you looking at, Councillor Bartlett? It was economic development. Thank you. Yeah, it just went out of my head there. Sorry. What we tried to do with economic development is to try and ensure in setting the budget that it, if you like, washes its own face. So it generates resources from whatever source is available to it to cover the costs of the team, rather than it being a cost to the local council taxpayer. And I think, so far they've been creative with regards to looking at all the potential grants that they can potentially tap into to ensure that they're capturing those resources to cover the cost of the team. That's the principle on which they're building their budget.
Yeah, thank you. Can I come back, Chair, please?
Yeah. Graham Farrant wants to say something.
Thanks. Just to add a little bit of flavour to that, I think we've where we have lost posts, I think as Adam just said, we've lost them mainly through vacancies. There have been some voluntary redundancies, and we did a voluntary redundancy trawl, and therefore we were able to achieve some efficiencies by deleting posts where people wanted to go. There have been a very small number of compulsory redundancies as a result of restructures in individual areas where demand is falling or where the restructure has required it. But largely it's been been through voluntary redundancies and deletion of vacant posts, which of course results in fewer people being employed, and in many cases agency staff, for example, have had contracts terminated. They wouldn't count in any redundancy figures, just to be clear about that.
Okay, is that I just wanted to make a a comment myself, really to say that I'm really pleased that the transformation working group is going to carry on for the moment, because I understand the difficulty with the transformation project being such an internal project, that it has been very difficult for local residents to see benefit. And I think that helping them understand the benefit is not really enough, that what we need to do is go forward and make sure that we realise the benefits from the transformation programme. So there are things in there that were done to try and improve services. And I think it's important that we, even if it's difficult, we've had difficult times, we should carry on trying to make sure those benefits are realised so that local residents can actually see some benefit. So anyone else want to say anything? Councillor Trent.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I am one of those people that really struggles to see the savings in the transformation, but I think the portfolio holder summed it up very well. We've been hit so hard by so many cuts, and I think there was a figure floated around of about £100 million taken away from the money that's available in real terms. So any transformation savings kind of fades into that, sort of gets lost. But I do feel that I've been around for 42 years nearly at the fringes of all of this. I've had 5 years out, but it's basically 42 years I've been involved. And I have to say that there are times that I can look back, but you're talking about 25, 30 years back, when things actually looked and felt better. I still remain to be convinced that things are getting better, although when you've got, well, it's like trying to sweep a flood out of the ground floor of your home with a broom, and you're just waiting for someone to come up and put the flood barriers up. But the one thing I can say, and it's beginning to sort of establish itself as being the situation, is that BCP, my initial thought was BCP was, what a disaster this is, and I was always against it, and I remain not happy with that, because I'm not one of these people who believes that bigger is better. But in the last just under 5 years, there has been an improvement in BCP. I do actually feel that things seem to be getting better now, which is quite an achievement, because it has had some really bad sort of periods of time. So whilst I struggle to see the savings, but we do appear to be moving in the right direction. So hopefully that's the one positive thing I can say about it. And maybe it has stopped us being totally overwhelmed by the flood.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on the points made earlier, if you don't mind. Don't want to labour the point too much, but in terms of, not redundancies, but number of posts lost. I do recall when the transformation programme started, we were talking about the number of posts being reduced significantly, because let's face it, it's you're either going to save money in not spending as much on your costs for procurement and all the rest of it, or you're not going to employ as many people. It's almost as simple as that. And we can afford to reduce the number of posts because we become far more efficient using the technology, etc. So one had an expectation that the number of posts would be reduced significantly. And so, I'd be very interested to find out, the number of posts that we have reduced. And of course, you would expect to have a corresponding reduction in the number of staff employed because of that. And I think that we really ought to understand what that really has done. The second point, I'd like to come back on the answer that Mr. Richards gave about the economic development. And I can understand the need to recover the costs of that service by attracting grants. I'm just thinking that 655k in grants every year, year on year, for the foreseeable future seems rather ambitious, and I wonder what the evidence for that is in putting that figure down. Thank you.
Does someone wish to answer that?
So I'm not sure we have that, unless Sarah can contribute.
I can certainly contribute from the perspective, Councillor Bartlett, of the reduction that you're alluding to. And I think as we've laid out in the paper, and certainly as you outlined yourself, we have made significant achievement in terms of establishing a modernised infrastructure and taking ourselves through what was a number of legacy councils into one. I think the position that we're in now is that we continue to can continue to make those efficiencies that perhaps you're alluding to through the continuation of our focus with the corporate strategy group, which will focus on two key programmes of work, which will be around that data and innovation piece, so building on the data platforms and the CRM systems and the technology we have in place to enable us to make further efficiencies, and on the customer and digital side as well, linking that to further efficiencies through the use of AI and building on the technology we have in place to support that. So I would envisage that will absolutely be something we shall continue to focus on, and we can certainly put some more benefits against that based on those outputs, if that makes sense.
Councillor Bartlett, has that answered your question?
Chair, if I may add, before Councillor Bartlett says yay or nay to that, he did indicate that he was looking at what was said back in 2019 as the kind of level of reduction in posts that we might expect through the transformation programme, and was querying, I think, whether or not that has been achieved. I can't put it in terms of numbers of posts, but if I could refer the board to paragraph 6, that indicates that the original business case suggested savings of the order of 26.7 million to 43.8 million. And as Councillor Bartlett has acknowledged, savings in terms of the number of millions equate to a certain extent with the number of loss of posts. So the question therefore could be framed in terms of, have we achieved the kind of savings that were predicted in the original business case? I wasn't around when the original business case was put together. I certainly have heard people querying as to whether it was actually over ambitious, and possibly even the phrase over egged has been used. But I think the actual achievement in terms of 50 million savings overall in terms of gross, and the net savings of 21 million a year, which we can look forward to, I think are of a reasonable order against those predictions. So I hope that is helpful.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Bartlett?
Not really. It's difficult to understand how that level of savings can be made without understanding the number of reductions in posts. I do accept what Councillor Hannah has just said. Does it really make any difference? We've achieved the objective that we were set, and so it doesn't really matter. But it's very difficult to understand how we've done it if you don't understand how many posts you've actually lost.
Councillor Bartlett.
Reduction of people, but let's not labour the point. I think we could just move on from that. As Councillor Hannah said, we've met the savings objectives. That's the key point. How we've done it, maybe those brighter than I can understand that.
Would you like would you like someone to maybe go away and investigate and come back with an answer to you on about the reduction in staffing levels?
Well, it might be. I don't particularly need an answer, but if anybody else is interested in looking into that, then please let them go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Graham.
So just to say that we'll go away and try and do a calculation, see if we can get an answer, and I'm happy to circulate that either to members of the board or to Councillor Bartlett individually. But it has been the case since the first report that came to the Cabinet in 2019 about the transformation programme that we've been flagging, there would be a significant reduction in the number of posts employed by the council throughout this process and through the merger process. So I don't think any of this is a surprise. The only issue I think is we've never actually just sat back and said, okay, exactly how many posts have we lost during this process? So that's an exercise we'll take away and see if we can do that, and therefore we can demonstrate that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. Sorry, I know others have been waiting, and I'm not going to take long. It's just to say, I would really be interested in that figure because Graham just said about sending it to Councillor Bartlett or to us. I would be interested, and I totally appreciate what you're saying. It's not surprising, but it is interesting to know the number, I think, and to have that actual factual information. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So first of all, I would echo the sentiments of many of the others in that it is remarkable, I think was the word that Councillor Bartlett used, to see that at the end of this process, which has been many years in train and been through many different organisations, that we got to the output that we wanted to. And I think that is really commendable. And as others have said, is down to the collective effort of the whole organisation, because there's not one single part of BCP that the transformation programme doesn't really touch. So Sarah and the team have done a fantastic job leading the programme, but this is a whole team effort. So I think it has to be said, congratulations to everybody that we got exactly pretty much where we thought we would get to at the beginning of the process. I don't necessarily agree with everything that came out in that, and as Councillor Bartlett has brought up one point around the reduction in economic development, and he asked the question, where is the evidence in that? Well, there is no evidence. The council have decided to move to a cost recovery model for economic development, and the outcome of that means that if we don't get that cost recovery or those grants in, we don't provide economic development functions. That is a decision, and I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but it is part of the process. But overall, I would be very grateful to everyone for all of the work that they've done. So I've got three very quick questions, two for the cabinet member and then one for the officers, if I may. The first one for the cabinet member. He mentioned earlier on that there, in the Echo article, I think there was some cynicism from residents around the savings that had gone here, not least because of reductions in service and everything. But I would reflect that was because the cabinet member and the administration spent about 10 months saying that there was a £44 million black hole, much of which was the purported uncertainty around the transformation savings, which we've now ended up pretty much exactly where we said it was. So I think the first question for the cabinet member, do you regret kind of peddling those myths at the time, considering those savings were exactly where we always said they would be? So that's the first question.
Councillor Hannah.
I don't share the councillor's view of the situation and have no regrets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is any more
short and sharp answer. I would ask them to look again, because they spent a lot of time saying we can't rely on these transformation savings and the Tories left as a black hole, and this paper clearly says that that is not the case. But I'll move on. The second question for the cabinet member is around governance. So we are, as you've said, Chair, moving away from the having the transformation board as this kind of starts to bed in. But as it mentions on paragraph 36, the ongoing governance that is established is for this corporate strategy delivery board, which consists of the chief exec, corporate directors, resource director, and a number of other officers, which occasionally reports to cabinet. It essentially removes any directly elected oversight over the process. Now, I get that as this becomes business as usual, you wouldn't necessarily need day-to-day oversight because it's moving from transformation programme being formed to implementation. But I just wondered what the cabinet member's view was, whether you think that occasional reporting to cabinet is enough for us councillors to be assured that once this beds in, that it continues to operate as we expect it to. So that's the second question.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. I don't see very much change in those terms. It is going to be a different body chaired by a different person. But what's going to continue is my role will continue as portfolio holder. I will continue to be liaising with now the chief executive on the various elements of the transformation programme that will continue. There will be reports as appropriate to cabinet in terms of updates. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee will have the opportunity to scrutinise the reports as they have done reports from the Transformation Board, and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is free at any time to request reports on any matter. So I don't think member involvement will actually be diminished. I hope that reassures.
And just to add to that, there is the Transformation Working Group as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Well, I mean, thank you for the answer. I hope the Cabinet member's right, but when we are essentially embedding ongoing savings of this scale, if I was the part of the administration, I would want to have a structural way to be assured that these were on track at all times. And I just worry that if we get to a position in 3 years' time where the savings start to slide, I might just say I told you so, but I hope that's not the case, and I hope that we can all keep track of all of this, because the whole point of these is that will be embedded systemically as well. But I've made the point. The final question I have, which probably one for officers, is just a technical one really. On paragraph 7, part of the reason we've got a difference between the gross figure of 50 million and the net figure this year of 34.7 million is due to ongoing revenue licensing and financing costs of £15.5 million. So it just seems like an awful lot of money that ongoing we're spending 15 million quid on licensing and revenue licensing and financing costs. Is that things like the laptops and stuff like that, or is it deeper? I just want to get a broad overview of why 15 million quid is being spent a year on that. I get it's part of the patter, but just be grateful for the detail.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So it forms part of our Microsoft licensing estate, which encompasses our security for all of our computers. It encompasses all of these systems that you're able to use on your computers, and many, many other things. And we monitor that budget very, very closely. We meet monthly with our finance teams. We work closely with industry to make sure that we are absolutely delivering value for money. We have a lot of internal processes in place to make sure that the estate is as efficient as it can be. And that's a 5-year agreement that we have taken to with Microsoft to enable us to get the best value for money for that licensing cost. So it is absolutely, as you're saying, a large amount of money, but it's something that we monitor on an ongoing basis, which, as I said, allows us to assure a number of different systems under that, which actually saves us money and makes us more efficient, having it all in one place, if that makes sense.
Yes, do
Can I just come in and maybe add a little bit of clarification to the figure, because I think the figure you quoted relates to the total expenditure incurred between 2020-21 and up until including the end of 24-25. So it's not a 1-year figure, it's a 5-year figure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 issues. The first one is to follow through from the points raised by Councillor Bartlett earlier on and referenced by Councillor Hannah in his responses with regard to the work that took place in the lead up to May 2019. In and of itself, obviously, we've been at this for a very long time, 5 years, but actually we were looking at this long before May 2019, and I think the report that set out the likely savings through local government reorganisation were mentioned earlier. And I think if there were comments made by people, which I think Councillor Hannah referenced, of those figures being, if you like, over-egged or something equivalent to that, this puts the lie to that ever having happened. And the reason that is the case is because there was a great deal of discussion and negotiation about what those figures were going to be, because what we didn't want was to enter into local government reorganisation, particularly around transformation savings, not being confident that we would be able to achieve them within a reasonable timescale. And I'm very pleased to see that the outcome of that is broadly in line with what was forecast over 5 years ago now, notwithstanding all the other circumstances which were totally unpredictable that the council and the world at large have been through. So I think that does demonstrate that by challenging a report that came through to us originally and making sure that it was fit for purpose and as accurate as we felt we could make it, that's what's turned out to be the case. But I must pay tribute to all the work that's been done in the meantime to get to that position. And it was always going to be the case that there would be redundancies as part of making that process work. And it stands to reason, does it not, particularly through officer structures, tiers 1 through to 5 or 6, that the amalgamation of all of those services would require less people, less headcount as a result. That was always understood, but it was always about promoting voluntary redundancy and making sure that there was a planned approach. And I'm glad to see that by and large that's what's occurred. The two other points I wanted to ask questions on are with regard to paragraph 25 to 26, which is the pay and reward strategy. And I accept that we did have some time on this, but it is absolutely critical to our organisation. It is led by people, and people are our greatest asset. So really two things. The first is, in those 5 years around pay and reward, could we just be clear as to what's actually been achieved? Because those paragraphs are particularly light on that. And then I'll come back to the second one once I've had that established. Thank you, Chair.
Someone like to answer that?
So thank you for the question. It is an extraordinarily complex situation that we find ourselves in, because we have officers that have transferred from the preceding councils. We have officers that have joined BCP councils subsequently through external employment, and we've put them onto the pool terms of conditions. We have officers that have been tupied into the council from external providers, whether it be the leisure provider in pool that we've recently taken in-house, or the previous externalised recycling waste contract in Bournemouth, for example. So there's a whole amalgam of terms and conditions. All of those individuals have not only different levels of pay, but different terms and conditions. For example, conditions for additional allowances, annual leave, flexi-time arrangements, all of that. What we have achieved is that we've brought those together into a single comprehensive pay structure and set of terms and conditions with enhancements where appropriate, which we have taken through now 5 separate ballots, 2 with unison, both of which were successful and got a majority to vote in favour, 3 with GMB, for which we have not got a majority. So we have a pay and reward process that could be implemented quickly and thoroughly, and which would avoid any future equal pay claims, we believe. So we've got all that in place. What we are doing at the moment, just to complete the picture, is we're continuing to negotiate with GMB, particularly to find out the reasons why their members have not voted in favour, and then we're trying to work out whether there are any other enhancements we can provide in that. That is a hugely complex task when you're looking at 5,000 people, or even 6,000 if you include the summer casuals, etc., who are on different terms and conditions. The finance support for that, I mean, if you saw the size of the spreadsheets, they are quite incredible, really, in terms of every time we change a particular parameter, then we have to change the calculation. We've negotiated those to the point 3 times now where we didn't believe that the trade unions had identified anything further to add to the mix, and that's how we put it to the ballot. We've also had various delays due to budgeting, putting the budget back, so that time has probably taken longer than it could have, whether it's longer than it should have, but it is an incredibly complex task, and is more complex, I go back to more complex than any other local government reorganisation, because for us, for every service, there were 3 sets of terms and conditions, 3 sets of grading. And just to emphasise the point, because I feel the need to, because I don't think anybody understands this, if you look at the way that a particular post is graded, say a planning officer, an environmental health officer, every council assesses them differently. Every council's grades are different. Even where we have a similar job evaluation scheme, we find that they're on slightly different spinal column points. So for every single job, we've had to revisit a situation where we have two or three different pay levels in place. And I think I said in my very first presentation to members in April 2019, we cannot afford to move everybody to the top. We don't want to move everybody to the bottom, so we're trying to find the right compromise position. So that's what's been going on. So I think it's been a hugely intensive piece of work. Incredibly good support from both HR and from finance. And we are at the point where I believe that we have the best offer that we can afford to give. What we have to do is work now with GMB to try and see how we can get that over the line, if that's helpful.
If I could just add to that, Chair, in September we sent to staff their indicative salaries based on the work that had been done over the summer on that. Since then, things have changed again. We have had new staff arriving with us who did not receive those letters in September. And we have had a review of some of the role profiles to ensure that staff were being placed on the correct role profile for the job that they're carrying out. So we're about to be sending out letters to both those types of members of staff to provide, in one case, an update on their role profile and the level of salary they can expect if pay and reward is agreed. And in the other case, simply to tell them as new members of staff, this is what is being proposed. So that is in the pipeline. Negotiations with unions are continuing, and we hope that we will see some good progress.
Thank you.
So, Chairman, my question wasn't to be overtly critical. It was to try and understand what had happened during that period of time, not least because prior to 2019, I can only speak for the former Bournemouth Council, but which is about half of BCP. We had pay and reward as a major issue that we had been working with for some time. So I do understand the complexities within one organisation. Clearly, I haven't been involved in the complexities of bringing together effectively 4 sets of terms and conditions, which is obviously considerably more complex. But it's been helpful to have that answer. My final question, partially already answered, but I think to try and gain a little bit more clarity, because it is quite unsettling that we're at this pivotal moment, but nobody quite knows what the outcome will be, but more importantly, when that outcome will conclude, and then what happens next, because that part of it, for many of our staff, not necessarily for the senior officers in the organisation as much as for those who are actually on the front line, it is always a matter of communication, but members need to understand what that situation is as well. So in terms of how much longer do we believe that those final negotiations will take, and we must have an idea, and then what happens next after that, because it won't be on that day that everything slots into place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So the Cabinet have agreed a process by which we can start the process for dismiss and re-engagement. That is a fallback position that we don't want to get to. We're hoping that negotiations will get us an agreed solution before that. I think the estimate is that even if you go down that process, it's about another year to fully implement. If we get agreement, then, as I understand at the moment, GMB would require to do another ballot. If they then got their staff's agreement, we'd be talking about another 6 months or so after that, because just to be clear, for every set of terms and conditions, we've then got to work out the individual's position, 5,000 to 6,000 people, and then we've got to write to them all to confirm that and implement that on a specific day. So I think we're talking about the back end of 2025 if we can get an agreed implementation, although we haven't set the timescale out. We were aiming for a 1st of May 2025 if we could have got agreement on the last ballot, so it'll be sometime late 25. If we have to go down the dismiss and re-engage route, then I think it's probably likely to be a little bit longer than that, because that is a very difficult process, involves processes with ACAS, etc. in the meantime. So I think we're talking about a year or so from now if we have to go down that sort of process, which is a long time.
If I could add to that again, it was shortly before the Christmas break that I was advised that negotiations were going well and that there were some positive moves taking place. I'm waiting for an update from Sarah Dean as the director now that we have all resumed our regular schedule of meetings. And I will be looking to see exactly where we are in those negotiations, what sticking points might remain, and what we can do to resolve those. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to just say that I do feel one of the reasons that you may have found the public a bit cynical about this program is because of its internal nature and the fact that any benefits of it are to do with internal things. And I think it's good to recognise that the people of Poole and Bournemouth and Christchurch didn't ask for BCP to happen. And because of that, they will be looking at us and expecting to see some benefits from it. And so I do think that, but I do believe that's something that we can still achieve. And that's what I think we ought to make sure that we don't forget, that that's something we need to keep on track to achieve those benefits for the residents that are looking at us and saying, why did you join the councils together? I'd just like to ask if there's anyone who wants to make any particular recommendations, or whether you're happy for us to just recommend to note the report as being a very good, thorough report, letting us know what's been done and also what's still to be done. Are people happy for us just to note the report? Okay, thank you. So the next item, does anyone need a comfort break before the next item? Everybody okay? Yep, all okay, good. So next item is regeneration progress report, and I'd like to invite Councillor Millie Earle to come and introduce that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to introduce our update on regeneration to the board, and really to answer questions in line with what Scrutiny have asked for, which I think the report does, but I did just want to kind of give a bit of a verbal overview of the report anyway. So obviously this is where the regeneration function of this council has moved from an external company, Future Places, in-house, and is delivered by a very professional team of regeneration experts, and is taking us really down that delivery route, whereas we've kind of been a little bit stuck in a lot of the preparatory work. I would say that this, and I know you're all aware that we did slim it right down. So where Future Places were looking at, I think, over 20 sites by the end, this is focusing on 4 sites that we really want to deliver. And then once they are delivered, it will start bringing in the ability to deliver more rather than being over capacity, meaning that nothing gets through. Because it's in our control now, we have been able to identify factors that are affecting the delivery of those sites, and that has enabled us to make really good progress in establishing an effective delivery model, really. Significant progress was made over the last year to understand those opportunities of those sites, including designing planning strategies, assessments of the cost of development, and the individual site constraints and the market intelligence as well to support the delivery model. Working efficiently across regen and housing delivery, the model really... oh, hang on, no, sorry, I've jumped around a bit. So to describe the model in a little little bit more detail, we're trying to work much more efficiently across regeneration and housing delivery. And that means really sticking to the principles in paragraph 10. And those also tie into the corporate strategy. For example, we're prioritising prudent budget management, but we're also ensuring that we use our regeneration opportunities to maximise those things that are really important to us, like social integration and economic growth, and also sustainability in the way that people live for not just a short-term future, but for a long-term future as well. We're also clear that housing delivery is the real driver on particularly two of these sites. And because we have a housing crisis, not just locally, but nationally, and I think we are all aware of those pressures within the system, we know that by using our land most effectively to deliver homes, we can help to remedy some of that. And to deliver that and shift to that sort of housing delivery model, we're working with Homes England, MHCLG, and the public and private sector to really deliver homes and deliver that kind of inclusive growth that we want to see. The paper also talks about some of those constraints on development. So I'm sure we are all aware that things have changed quite dramatically since kind of pre-COVID years. Things like the funding issues and making sure that we are within our legal and planning obligations, and that's been shifting quite rapidly actually with things like the Grenfell disaster, and also new policies that are coming through, like biodiversity net gain and so on, and that's really shift the viability in general. So just as an example, with fire safety in tall buildings, it means that escape via a second staircase means that buildings over 18 metres, which is 6 stories in height, means are only viable. So basically we have to build much taller to be able to have the viability of putting in a second staircase in some of those sites to allow people to escape if there is an emergency. Of course, build costs and inflation are up. We've got interest rates now at 4.75%, which means that borrowing and financing some of this work is really difficult. In fact, even through the Public Works Loan Board, we're not in a position within our budget to take on a massive amount of risk through borrowing to deliver on these sites alone. We have to look at a much wider picture. How can we mitigate risk by diversifying, for example? How can we have long-term business plans in place so that we can make sure that we're bringing in the revenue to service that loan and so on? So it's not been as simple as before, and I think actually because these sites are so important, it's how we would then build that into our MTFP if we did want to go down a borrowing route with these ones. We also have labour shortages and a lack of construction skills. So obviously Brexit was a huge contributor to that. It's been really difficult. I do think that this is something that we're all realising, especially with the government's ambition to deliver 1.5 million homes, but actually it could be a really good opportunity to train a load of people and to be able to build a new economy around home building that we haven't seen for a while, because there hasn't been the ability there because the costs are so high. So, I think if the government can come up with any ways to remedy that situation, then we can kind of surf on the back of that, hopefully, and be able to help deliver the ambition here. There have also been changes in things like the affordable housing grant rates. For example, the Affordable Homes Programme is only covering 25% of the scheme costs, whereas before it was a lot more, which means that we have progressively gone into this really difficult situation where we're not actually being able to get those grants to cover some of the development that we want to see. And of course, affordable housing is so essential to making sure that we deliver homes for local people in particular. The report then goes into the priority regeneration sites. They are Holes Bay, the Dolphin Leisure Centre, the Winter Garden site and the BIC. there is a bit of a rundown of where we are with each of those sites, but we were due to come forward with decisions in March for how we best progress those. So Holes Bay is currently we've done consultation and engagement around it, but the next step is really that development brief that maintains our ability as council to influence the future development and make sure that it delivers on what we need via a conditional agreement. The aim is to use that then to attract a partner to then help us see it through the design, the development, the planning stages, rather than bringing someone in much later and losing out on the feasibility of it whilst the market and the conditions here are shifting every day. It also helps to kind of mitigate some of those risks, and because we know what we want to deliver, which is that mixed tenure waterfront scheme, then we can set those parameters and invite someone to help us develop those plans. We also have some interest from Homes England on the site, not least because it's one of the, in fact, the largest site in the southwest of England, brownfield site for development, and it's also owned by us. So we're not, they're not going to have to go through the compulsory purchase from it because market failure meant that it hasn't come forward. However, with it in our hands, we have a lot more control with that, and I'm really glad that Homes England are keen to work with us on that, and they've already put in quite a lot of investment to have a look at what they can do with it alongside us. The Dolphin Leisure Centre is the next one, and that's I'm sure many people know the leisure centre. It's a really resource intense facility. It has high running costs. It has a poor carbon footprint, and it costs a lot of money to run at the moment, and will cost a lot of money if we want to revamp it or maintain it or even rebuild it. So something needs to be done. It's coming to the point where it is unsustainable within a council subsidy, and actually that subsidy could maybe do a little bit better if we wanted to look at delivering something new or widening the offer or responding to what the market want in a good council run leisure centre. We have now taken in leisure in-house rather than it being outsourced in pool to everyone active, and so we have a little bit more flexibility around how we can best work out how to fund it, really based on understanding a bit more about what money we have coming in, and how we can maximise that, not just necessarily to run the centre, but also then if we wanted to go down the route of borrowing, we would know how much we have to get in every year from revenue to service any loan. We are in the place now where we're doing those structural surveys on the site. Now we have got full access to it and we have full control over it. So it's now a case of finding, is it something that we want to regenerate by improving what we've got there, or is there a way in which we can develop it completely? And you'll see in the report, an initial idea was to see how we could use some of the land in the area to finance a build. However, it's looking like that is just not going to be an option. It's not going to be able to bring in the money to be able to build a leisure centre, but it could potentially still be a place where we can deliver homes. So there are some opportunities on that side. We've also got the Winter Gardens, which I'm sure many will know. Lots of people have been involved on getting the initial planning consent for a really big scheme with mixed use, but that has lapsed now. And actually the viability of the scheme isn't there anymore, so it's unlikely to go ahead in that form. But it does set a bit of a blueprint for what could be delivered on the site, and some of that work is really useful in seeing what's feasible. As a council, I'd say we're concerned about the parking, both in terms of the need and the ease of it in that location close to the town centre, but also, that is a good revenue stream for the council. And actually, if we were to lose that amenity there, we would be losing revenue from our budget. So whether there are other ways to deliver revenue income on the site through parking, but also to deliver homes as well, is where we're looking at the moment. And finally, the BIC. This is always, I think it's probably been a tricky one for the last 10 years or so, because there's been this pull between the building being functional and operational and having a place in our local economy, but also that it almost just, it's just not the amazing building that it could be on that site. You know, you've got direct views over the sea, you've got a huge footprint, and actually could there be a lot more done with that site in particular to make the most of it where it's situated on the cliff edge. And I think now we're coming to a point where we will be able to make that decision as to whether we want to really go out and look for that external funding, and whether that is actually viable, whether anyone is looking to invest in a site that large to deliver something really special, or if we want to really work with what we've got to make the best of what we've got there, and also work with our partners at BH Live, who are desperate to invest, really invest in that opportunity and make sure that it's delivering everything that it can in its current form. Right, so I hope that's helpful in way of an update and sets a little bit more of the scene. I was just going to say I've got with me Amina, who is our Director of Investment and Regeneration. Kieran is also here as Housing Delivery Lead. And then Councillor Rich Herrick, is here because of the leisure elements of these sites in particular. And what we've been moving to, particularly in the last couple of months, is actually working much more collectively across our different portfolios to look at these sites from every single view, rather than it just being looked at from a regeneration view, and that's really helped actually, because it means you get those other priorities and those other ideas coming to the table, and it means that we can discuss and move them forward. And I think that's really what we've done. It's now a case of getting to that March deadline and getting those decisions ready, getting those options down, those decisions ready, and then taking them through the democratic process, both here, overview and scrutiny, and then on to council and on to cabinet. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Comments? Councillor Waters.
Regarding the Dolphin Centre, is the most likely option on the table now that will be replaced by housing?
No.
No. Have I misread the report?
No, it won't be replaced by housing. In fact, what we're looking at is that part of the town centre. So you've got the area, of Poole Park. You've got the car park there. You've also got areas like Selldown, which could be better utilised. So it's really looking at how do we make the most of all those sites to potentially deliver housing on one, but then move the leisure centre elsewhere, and the housing would then fund the leisure centre. So I quite like it because it's that place-based approach, is looking at how to make the most of the whole situation rather than just an individual site. I think that as much as that would have been a perfect solution, both to deliver homes to then fund a leisure facility, I don't, all of how we've looked at it means that probably isn't going to be viable in the current climate. So there may be an opportunity later on to do that, but really the structural surveys will help reveal exactly what state our leisure centre is in, and if we need to be a lot more urgent and think about how this is going to impact our MTFP to deliver a really decent leisure centre that people need. I think we often think about gyms and swimming pools and everything else, but for us, we deliver really, really good service in our leisure centres across BCP, and we also deliver it at an affordable price, and I think that access issue is really important. So the leisure centre is the focus for this. How do we get the leisure centre rebuilt? And if we need to leverage on the additional space available there and any building that we can do within the constraints that we have, then we have to explore all those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Yes.
So if we are going to go down the leisure centre, have we explored as part of the viability the combination development of a data centre underneath the leisure centre? Because it's happened a few times throughout the country now where data centres have been built underneath swimming pools because they're really, really hot and they heat up the pools, and the pool's really, really cold and the water can be used to cool down the data center. That also wipes off a bunch of your energy costs. Simultaneously, the Prime Minister said today that we're looking to become an AI powerhouse in the UK, which might mean, unless the Prime Minister is following the last 4 Prime Ministers and just paying lip service to AI, that there might be some funding available to help produce more data centres that could be used to offset the costs of the leisure centre itself. Have we explored that at all as part of the viability?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say on that, we have been looking at other leisure centres across the country and how they are funded and financed and everything else. And there are some really, really good innovations, particularly around heating swimming pools, because that is, not something any council wants to do because of the sheer cost. I think that, we do need to look at all of those options, how we can best do this with a low carbon footprint. I think that's something that's quite important to me, because we do want this to be sustainable. And actually, if we can use something like data and a data center to be able to generate the heat to heat the pool, then I think we should look into it. I'm just going to see, Amina, has there been any?
We haven't looked at data centres specifically because we've been looking at planning and policy compliance schemes, but it's a really helpful suggestion because I think government did sort of give a steer today. I think, as Councillor Elves mentioned, there's enough land there for us to look at what other uses we could deliver, but priorities about the leisure centre and how we can make that work, and what our options might be in terms of bringing that forward. But it's something in terms of data centre we can take and look at.
Thank you very much. Your first question was one that I was going to ask. Thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you very much. Electricity and water, what could go wrong? No, in all seriousness, it is something that's happening everywhere, and I'm very, very supportive of it, despite the jokes. I've got a couple of questions, but first of all, I have to say it really, it's great that we're finally talking about this. This is something that the board had to request a paper on because it'd gone extremely quiet on regeneration for quite a long time, and it's pleasing to see the leader being very chirpy and positive about this in person, because I have to say the report itself reads a bit like an excuses paper. There's a lot, the majority of the report is all reasons why things aren't happening or can't happen, and all the obstacles that are in the way, which I recognise and are absolutely there, but I just think we need to have some more optimism here and some more vision, because at the moment it does kind of feel like we've given up, and I think in particular we've heard a lot about we've talked about future places, and there's a lot of kind of rhetoric around now that we brought this in-house and we're finally finding out the situation. I think we do have to remember we did own future places. It wasn't this kind of shadow entity that sat somewhere else. And just to kind of correct the narrative on that, future places weren't looking at 20 sites to develop. We asked them as a council to look at all of the sites that we had available and then to bring back a priority list and which ones we were going to deliver, which ones would be joint ventures, which ones we would sell. But it's this council, since the election, that has decided to scrap that piece of work before they finished it. So it wasn't that Future Places failed, we never let them finish the work. But we are now, we've got a new way of doing it and doing it in-house. But there were reasons why we created Future Places, not least financially, because of the situation with the upfront cost of regeneration. It's really, really hard to find that in a difficult budget situation. And we're now faced once again with a situation where there is essentially a choice between, do we look at our regeneration sites or do we look at the spiraling costs of adult social care and children? It's always pretty clear which one will win, and it feels to me that's why we've got such a restricted vision around this now. But the first question I have is, what about all the other sites? I appreciate that the administration wants to focus on these 4 priority sites, and I've got a couple of questions about those in a second. But have we just stopped work on all of the, I think it was, we calculated at £1.3 billion of GDV, gross development value, of council-owned sites. We've heard nothing about the others. So what are we doing about the rest of them? And I've got a couple more technical questions. Thank you.
Is that something you can answer, Millie, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in there. So in terms of what we are doing about the other sites, they are still there. Obviously, when you said 3 billion or something, I was like, how many sites? But then I realised it was money. The sites are still in the background, and what we were working on is how we can best package those up for development by leveraging in private investment and that kind of thing. I don't think what I mean to say is, in terms of our internal delivery, we're not the delivery drivers behind them. We are the ones who are currently stewarding them. But actually, when we have conversations with developers, and when we talk to investors, and when we talk to people who are looking at delivering something or another that we think would benefit the conurbation, then those sites are in the background and there for us to talk about specifically. I think that we can do a little bit more in terms of pushing that out to the economy, and that will be, you know, a bit of a renewed focus, I think, coming out of the end of these ones, whilst we've had this very intense focus on these sites. Actually, I don't think we should be moving forward. I don't think it's prudent to put resource into those, significant resource, when we still haven't delivered a single site within the regeneration programme, either under Future Places or under this administration. And I think that's a failure attributed to all sorts of different things. However, if we do spread ourselves too thin, we're not going to see anything delivered, and that's what I'm trying to avoid, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Hey, thank you. You had some more questions.
Yeah, and look, I do welcome that, because I do think that the rest of the site shouldn't just be in the background, and it's a bit concerning to hear the kind of idea that we'll if people want to talk to us about it, oh, we've got one in the bottom drawer, you're interested in that one. I don't think that is the way that we are going to achieve best value if we are going to be disposing of a lot of these sites. So I would urge a more reasoned strategy around regeneration. I get that it's good to have priority projects, but you know, we are a big authority with, you know, big aspirations. We should do, and we own a tremendous amount of developable regeneration sites. The only final thing I would mention on that as well is that I absolutely welcome that we have to do this hand in hand with housing. We have, as the leader has mentioned, big housing needs, you know, huge housing targets that we have to facilitate. But there is a reason that regeneration and housing are always slightly separate. Housing sites are housing sites. They are there to fill a utilitarian purpose, to provide homes. Most of these sites are not bread and butter housing sites. They are central to the kind of economic fabric of Poole and Bournemouth and Christchurch. And I think there is a little bit of a danger sometimes in just looking too much at them as places to stick loads of homes. It does make it more viable, and we've talked about that before, but it would be much more welcome to see some kind of vision about what these could be to help, for instance, our tourist industry or our leisure industry or our economic development with these waterfront estates. So, but anyway, I've said my piece. Just a couple of quick questions about the specifics. So it's very, very light, this paper on Bournemouth International Centre, and I kind of am getting the impression that it's one of those that we're just going to see if BH Live want to spruce it up a little bit, and then we'll worry about it another day. Under the last administration, there was a Hello? Am I out? Yeah. There was some thinking which we were exploring about looking at the two sites that were almost next to each other, the Winter Garden site, which is built in an old quarry, and will be very suitable to kind of big box type offers like conferencing, and potentially look at swapping those two sites so that you could keep that continuity of offer by building a new BIC where the Winter Gardens was, and then opens up that incredibly amazing seafront estate, which is tremendously more viable. Have we just scrapped that idea now?
So the previous regeneration report described how they have been decoupled, so they're no longer dependent on each other within the work with BDC. However, the more we look at it, the more I question whether we're going to get a decent sized conference centre onto the Winter Garden site. I think you could get something maybe similar, maybe with a different layout and so on, but it's not going to be that much bigger. And it's not going to change the market. It's not going to bring more people in because we are able to offer something different for that specific site. So you're right. It's not an easy decision to make, and we will have all the options presented, and they will go through the democratic process. But I just want to manage expectations that actually looking at those two sites together is not something we're doing anymore because they have been decoupled. Actually, it's about what we can deliver on each of those sites. But it would require such huge investment for those two. I do have questions around the viability of actually getting in that investment for those.
And then final question, Chair, and just on that, Leader, there is a tremendous amount of work in there, but I would urge, as with many of these, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There were very real reasons why that approach was being considered, not least because part of the reason we've had difficulty with the 40-year-old Bournemouth International Centre is it's still very successful and it's still pretty central to our year-round industry in central Bournemouth. You know, we have the second largest number of hotel rooms in the country outside of London, pretty much facilitated by the fact that we offer a lot in that venue. And the real problem with the reprovision on site that we were finding was that as soon as you interrupt that continuity of offer, it's very, very difficult to get it back. Even if you try and say, well, we'll try and rebuild one part here, it becomes very, very difficult. So, you know, I'm quite happy to offer any background I can give, and we can and should work together on this. This transcends politics. But we can't just keep redoing things all over again and again and again and again. So the very last question I have is just on the Holes Bay site. And I think what I'm reading in this paper is that the council is now looking at putting together a development brief, and then we'll go out to try and find partners to try and deliver this. And in her opening remarks, the leader said that the benefit of all of that was that we could sort out viability ahead of the process, because as we all know, it's often the case, particularly with major regeneration project, particularly something of the size of Holes Bay, and as we know, it's got huge. You know, we've got the largest bit of concrete outside of Heathrow Airport, if I remember one of the key stats, and that comes with challenges as well. And I get that the viability is something we need to try and nail ahead of time. I just don't understand how we're doing that. We have a very small regeneration team in-house at the moment, and I don't understand at all how, as part of the development brief, we are getting a really refined view on viability so that we don't get kind of taken for granted when it comes to a joint venture situation ahead of time. I think you need that private sector expert experience to facilitate that. So how are we getting that viability experience when we've got such a small in-house public sector led team?
Would somebody like to answer?
So in the report, it describes how we are leveraging our relationship with Homes England. They are the ones who are putting down the money and putting down the ability to do that really in-depth work around bringing this site forward, and it is because it is such a strategic site, not just to our area but across the country, because it can deliver a really good number of homes and probably deliver something quite special there because of the location and the fact we can put some different uses on the site and really have a different model of that housing too, with different tenures available for people, you know, to be able to buy and to rent. So I think that that answers the question, in that this isn't just about public investment, private investment. We are also using all those links that we have in government and in Homes England to bring that site forward, because it's something that everyone wants to see done.
Okay, thank you. Whoever wants to go first. I mean,
I was just going to come back on the point around the vision, because actually one of the positives that we've had, particularly from Homes England and funders and private sector investment, is that there's much more clarity around our vision in terms of what we want from these sites. And that's absolutely key in any regeneration. It's about establishing what we want, how we want it delivered, and how much it might cost to deliver, and then how we work out a delivery model. In all the studies and the surveys which have been undertaken, the one thing which was missing is what are our aspirations. And actually, the key feedback and why we've got this established relationship, Homes England, is because they understand. And one of the feedback we've had for quite some time has been, we haven't really understood what the offer is. What are these sites? In totality, if these sites come forward, it's over 1,000 homes. It's more investment in the local area. It's more jobs. That bigger story actually is the vision that we've had good feedback and Homes England input, and the private sector partners that we've been talking to have all said actually this is about working in collaboration across the private and public sector. And I think that interest they've demonstrated is because we've been able to articulate our vision and our strategy for the sites, which was missing, and now we're much clearer in terms of what we're doing. And so whilst I hear the point around the paper and the challenges, it's also understanding that to be a good client and to be a good project team is understand some of the challenges that the market is facing.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to pick up the point. I think there was discussion about future places who are doing this many projects. How come we're only focusing on 4? What's happened to the rest? And just to add a bit to the debate, which is that the CNAS programme, which I can never remember unless I read it, the Council New Build Housing and Acquisition Programme, of course, have picked up some of those projects. And that we've moved the CNAS programme to be within Amina's directorate. So that directorate now has new housing, acquisitions and build alongside regeneration. So I think it's important to see that connection. And what we did with all of those projects, we went through each one and ensured that we had a future for each of those projects. So some of them are being led by others. So Paul Marina, for example, which was an embryonic project, shall we say, Paul Harbour Commissioners are leading on that. We'll support them where we need to. Some of them, like Paul Civic Centre, of course, we've got an instruction through the council to look at the soft market testing, so that's ongoing. So I don't think any projects disappeared. I think we found the right place for them. But 2 of those places, CNS Programme and Regeneration, are under Amina. Some of them were elsewhere, either with partners or elsewhere in the council.
Thank you. So, Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, thanks to Amina for the paper. And yes, she answered all of the questions, thank you very much, that were put in the brief. But of course, it does raise a number of issues. And the bottom line to the requirement for ONS, all the questions that we've asked, is, how much progress have we made on those priority projects? How much does it cost us to make that, to move forward on them? And what is the overall cost of those programs over the years? The report sort of repeats things that I've heard many times over the last 10 years about our strategy, what do we want to do? And each time we come around to a different way of approaching it. And, we had an in-house team. We couldn't manage it in-house. We brought in the BDC for whatever reason. A different model through future places was chosen. And now we've gone back to an in-house team. And now I see the BDC model has re-emerged again. Well, hey ho, here we go again. And what's the next step? Oh, I know. Why don't we have a wholly owned development company within the council? We just seem to go on and on and on with some of these projects that have been in fruition for years. And I'd just like to quickly touch on some of those projects and make a couple of comments as we go through. The Holes Bay development, of all the priorities, the one that I got some encouragement from the paper was this one, because it does show that this is a strategically important project, probably for government as well. And the only way that site is likely ever to go to come to fruition is with government intervention, government help, and through a partnership with Homes England. So I think the approach to that is exactly spot on. And that one is the only one I have any optimism with at all at the moment. With regard to the winter gardens, where do I go with this? One of the things I was hoping to see in the paper was what the total capital spend on the projects have been since the ideas were first raised. And I can't see that. And I know in the paper you said that those costs are available on the ERP system. Well, I did try to find them. I couldn't find them, probably because I don't know how to work the ERP system. But the point with that is that, you know, we know that the BDC wrote off £10 million against the Winter Gardens project not very long ago, and yet it now seems to be regenerating itself. We know that the project was put on hold by Future Places so they could analyse the parking requirements for a parking study. So here we are, another year or 15 months later, whatever, still saying the same thing. We're awaiting a parking study before we can decide what we can do with it. With regard to the, I won't say anything about the Dolphin Centre, but as far as the BIC is concerned, again, you know, we had all the Future Places were looking at that, and we seem to have just stagnated again with no movement on that whatsoever. And what I would say quickly about the BIC is that BH Live is going to have great difficulty investing in that facility if they are not encouraged by the council to do that by offering them some kind of security of tenure, because otherwise, you know, why would they want to invest huge amounts of money if they're likely to have the facility removed from them at some point? But bottom line of all of this is, you know, we are having paid interest on the monies that we borrowed in order to do these developments. And over the years, a lot of money has been borrowed, a lot of money has been spent, and we're paying interest on those. And it's not just those priorities, it's, you know, you throw Cardi's Key into the equation as well. I think just on the, I think you actually said in the paper about how much interest we're paying on Hulls Bay. I think it's about 200,000 a year or something, which raised another question in the paper. I think you said that the money was raised through the NEP. But the other part of the paper sort of implies that we actually borrowed the money. I'm not quite sure how it was funded, but the bottom line here is that, you know, we are having to pay through the revenue budget the cost of all of this work going forward. The cost of the department is £750,000 a year. Add that to the cost. What is this doing to our revenue budget, and how realistically are these programmes moving forward, and will they ever come into fruition? Last point is the major sticking point has always been the inability to raise finance. And that problem, no matter what strategy, whatever you come up with, unless you can raise the finance, these things aren't going to happen. And I'm not encouraged, other than in the Hulls Bay, the Hulls Bay site, where the Homes England are involved, the likelihood of raising finance, you do cover it in the report, and you say the BDC have got a way of attracting investment. I'd like to know how. That's not explained. You know, I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit cynical here, but, you know, we've been round and round this boy again, and we just revisit the same issues time and time again, and we're spending taxpayers' money in the process. And I'm not really very encouraged by it, but it's not a personal thing on the, you know, the work that's being done in the department. That's all very well and good. I'm just looking at the overall situation and where we are now compared with where we were sort of 10 or 11 years ago. And I can't really see us moving any further forward on it. Just one last point. In the report, you say that the cost of affordable housing, the grant means that we get a certain percentage, but I worked it out. Oh yeah, you get a grant of 25% now. I worked that out as 520k per social home. That's an awful lot of money to build one home, isn't it? Okay, thank you.
Does anyone want to come back on any of those points? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve, for your input. It's always so good to listen to you. I really enjoy it because I think you raise a lot of fair points and a lot of good points. I completely agree with your assessment of regeneration over the years. I think we have gone round in a bit of a circle, and I think progress has been really hard to come by. a lot of these developments and a lot of developments in general cross administrations, and I think we have to be really honest. And I think we almost, it might sound silly for a politician to say this, but I don't think this paper or what we need to do in the next 2 years is about delivering anything. I think it's about making real progress on these sites and being able, for whatever administration comes next, to be able to just pick them up and run, because previous administrations haven't been able to do that. Part of that's political, but part of that is just no progress was made. And I think it's about getting things going as much as anything, and as much as on delivery. From my perspective, I feel like this is the best shape we've been in to do that. You know, we've got a director who has come from a London borough, has delivered previously, has already identified in her 6 months a lot of the process issues that we've had and a lot of the things that we need to be changing. We've got a leader who's really ambitious, wants to see sites come forward. And I think the approach we're taking, even though it's being criticised this evening, I think the approach we're taking on prioritising sites is really an important one and a key one, because, you know, you can talk about the amount of GDP that could potentially be delivered, but the potential of something that isn't delivered as well. You know, if you've got £3 billion of potential GDP, but you don't deliver anything, that's nothing. You know, so I'd much rather see sites progress. And again, that's really the key. Just you had a lot there, so I'm probably not going to be able to cover it all, especially not myself. But just on how Holes Bay was purchased, I think a big proportion of it was via the LEP. Some of it was from government capital grant funding, around it was 5 million. 5 million from the LEP. I think it was 2.6 in terms of grant funding from government, and then the rest was through prudential borrowing. So yeah, but I don't know if anyone else wants to come back in on this.
Okay, that was oh yes, Councillor Earl.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think there is quite a fair assessment there, and I agree with Councillor Wilson in the frustrations around some of these sites moving forward. I would just say I think that this is part of the transformation, not the transformation programme, but part of the transformation that as an administration we've been really pushing for, which is looking at how we can particularly work with partners to deliver on some of these sites, and this actually came up as, you know, an example is the BDC one. So Muse at the moment they've got an existing joint venture partner through two different bodies. One is called the English Cities Fund, which is alongside Legal and General. And the other one is Habico, which is a development vehicle to bring forward 3,000 low carbon affordable homes for rent. And these are ambitions which are supported via Homes England and will be delivered via them as that joint venture. So in terms of the additional funding that is available, there is funding out there, and we have the attention of government to use that funding to unlock their priority and our priority. So I just wanted to clarify that was what that was referring to in the paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bartlett, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Just quickly about the sites, and Councillor Broadhead did touch on this, and that was the BDC or the other sites. And of course, the BDC arrangement has got 16 sites allocated to it. They've done 4, and for some reason, everything just stopped with the BDC. I don't know, that was through funding, non-viability of the others, but there's been nothing. And now it seems to be resurrected on the basis that they may be able to attract finance. Well, we've heard the difficulty about obtaining finance. What is there about sort of the BDC now taking those projects ahead? They seem to have renewed confidence in their ability to do that. And of course, we have no choice because they have an option on all of those sites. we can't actually do anything without BDC's permission, effectively, from what I understand. So those sites have got to be dealt with, from what I understand, with BDC, because we can't do anything else with them. But maybe I'm wrong on that. And I did understand the point about the investment through BDC and its other partners, that may help in attracting investment. I did understand that bit. Thanks, Leader. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Did anyone want to come back on the BDC?
So I think it's not I wouldn't express it as a renewed optimism in their ability to do all the sites. What we've discussed with BDC is the current environment, the economic circumstance, and the winter gardens, and particularly the revised parking framework that's coming forward. So that could potentially lead to a reduction in the requirement for public car parking on the site, and that might make the site viable. That's what BDC are investigating at the moment, waiting for them to come back. We've also pushed them quite hard on, if there are sites which they are not going to develop in that portfolio, let's talk about what we do with those and how we might bring them back to the council and get them developed. So I don't think it's BDC is now coming back to the fore for all sites. It's really the winter gardens, which has got some new parameters around parking, and we're waiting to hear their response from that following the session that we had in December.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rice.
Hi, yeah, good evening. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to just come in to highlight, which I'm sure you are already doing in all of the work, but the need to ensure that these sites are developed with decarbonisation in mind. So we've already discussed the heating requirements and a potential idea for the swimming pool, but also the need to reduce the need to travel so much. So transportation is one of the most difficult areas to decarbonise, and one of the essential aspects of it is decreasing the need to travel. So having a car park in the having a swimming pool that is in the centre of town, so that people are able, not needing to use their cars to get to it. For example, there'll be lots of other criteria for all of the different sites, but I just wanted to ensure that this is being considered. Thank you.
Someone wish to come back on that first?
Yes, Councillor Rice, just to give you some reassurance, I think our corporate strategy makes it pretty clear that we prioritise the environment and working within the environment rather than trying to make changes to it or disrupt it and do anything that we shouldn't be doing. And I think this is really interesting with a site like Holes Bay, for example, which has just been derelict for so long with nothing on it. If they had at least planted it up or something, then we could have had a lot more coming off that site in terms of biodiversity, but there's just been nothing. And I think a lot of it is around, particularly with that site, is taking it forward and then being able to do the biodiversity net gain, which actually gets better carbon capture on that site, and also integrates the use of like the shoreline as well. I think there is a huge potential, and it's not just the benefits of delivering housing, but it's the benefits of delivering green spaces that people want to go and enjoy, people's access to nature and the environment, people's local amenity, health, and everything else that comes with having a really good, well-designed neighbourhood. And I'm really excited about that. So I did also just want to mention that we had some amazing sites coming forward. The one I always raise is Alice Gardens in my ward, which was built via, as a council, delivered as a council, and it had houses built to passive house standard, it had heat pumps, it has solar panels, it had everything needed to make sure that a family doesn't get caught in having to pay really expensive bills that are attached to the cost of fossil fuels. So I just wanted to give you that assurance that I think that needs to be a priority in terms of delivering quality and reducing carbon as much as possible, because otherwise we would be going against our corporate priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add a couple of points, if I may, around some of the issues that have been raised already, most particularly around the Bournemouth Development Company. You'd expect me to, given that I set it up in 2011. Just to correct Councillor Bartlett, it's delivered 5 schemes, not 4. And it is clear to me that something has gone really horribly wrong since the formation of BCP Council, in that no schemes have begun to be progressed since that occurred. So what is it? Because the model is one around urban regeneration and having comprehensive development rather than piecemeal through the private sector. And with proper management, proper leadership, this isn't a political point, but it is around management and leadership, it should be delivering and delivering far more. So I look at this paper where there is one site within their options, which is the Winter Gardens, and I see nothing in there that encourages me to think that anything is going to happen anytime soon, if at all. Partly through viability issues, but also I think because it doesn't feel to me in reading this paper that it's a particular priority. Now, the Winter Garden site has lain empty for so long that very few people today probably even remember what was on it before the Winter Gardens was demolished. And if we're now saying that we're so reliant on the car parking income from that site that there is no incentive for the council to get anything done, which effectively in practice is what's happening, then I think for the medium term, hope appears to be lost on that site. So I'd very much like to see updates coming through from this report, which only deals with 4 sites. 4 sites across the whole of BCP. That is hardly ambitious, even if we get cracking with them. So let's have some updates on there to see whether actually progress is being made in reality. So that's my point on the Winter Gardens. To turn to the Bournemouth International Centre, the point made by Councillor Bartlett is absolutely critical. Again, I was leading on setting up BH Live when we did so, and that term is now at the horizon, coming up for renewal. And it is absolutely critical for the management of the BIC to know that they are sure-footed in any plans that they want to bring forward for remodelling it, because it's very clear from what I've heard it's not going to be redeveloped, so therefore for remodelling it, for doing the necessary capital expenditure, both back of house and front of house, that really will either keep it in the market or will begin to allow it to exit from the market. And they need to have that reassurance, and they need it very, very soon, because they simply will not be able to fund it otherwise. And then finally, Chairman, the issue of Holes Bay and the seeming reliance on Homes England to find the solution for us is not a long-term strategy. This scheme is going to be very significant in terms of the capital it will need and the methodology of raising that capital, presumably in large measure working with a private sector partner, but it will also cost the council money. The private sector partner is not going to come along and take on all of that risk, whatever the deal is, unless the council are absolutely wedded to it financially. And I speak from some experience in saying that. So I would want to see, again, a progressive report coming forward again in the future to assure us that actually progress is being made, tangible progress, real progress, and so that we can see at which stage we can expect to see development actually commencing. And I would have thought that that update needs to happen perhaps more ambitiously and more frequently than is in mind at the moment.
Councillor Earl.
Just on that last point there, Councillor Beasley, I think one of the reasons why we slimmed down the regeneration agenda was so that we could put that resource into something that was more likely to deliver by not spreading ourselves across too many sites. Although I think, though, I don't mind if we come to scrutiny a little bit more with this. I would say in March we do have a lot of papers coming through which will really seal the decision on these sites, and I would gratefully receive Scrutiny's input on that. I think then it's around, what is the next step, and making sure that we have those touch points with Scrutiny so that you guys are assured that there is progress on the site, and that we are keeping all councillors updated, because if it's a council priority, it's a priority for everyone here, and we need to make sure that everyone feels that things are moving in the right direction, and I think they are. I think with Amina on board and the team in house, and also things like just bringing BCP Leisure in house has opened so many more doors with the Dolphin Leisure Centre site. Things are changing in a way that it's aligning how we can reach that final delivery stage, and I'm really excited from what I've heard from the team, and I'm looking forward to presenting those papers in March.
Thank you.
Just to pick up points about BDC, and I think the real issue is about viability. So paragraph 40 talks about the car parking strategy, which is critical to unlock sites, because at the moment many of the sites that BDC, in fact the basis on which the sites were being transferred across them, but they would re-provide the same amount of public parking provision. That makes most of the sites unviable because of the cost of producing the car parking. And if you focus on the Winter Gardens as a really good example of that, it was the additional cost of providing public car parking that was making the scheme unviable. What we're hoping is that a reduced amount of car parking requirements might make more of those schemes viable. But we are constantly talking to BDC, but it has been a change in viability over the last 5 years, which is critical, because building costs have gone up well above, construction inflation has been well above RPI and CPI, and we've seen the effect of that. The requirements on, we heard earlier about the new rules on buildings above 6 stories, for example, with twin means of escape, means that many buildings that would have been viable are not viable, and that's a national issue being faced by all developers. And things like Cotlands Road, where BDC had a proposal with a single occupier pre-COVID. We went through COVID, and that single occupier came out wanting smaller premises, not larger premises, and have subsequently gone somewhere else within the BCP area. So there's a whole range of factors that are actually making many of the schemes that BDC thought they could develop in 2017, 18, 19 not viable under current economic circumstances and with current construction costs. That's what we're working through with them. The Winter Gardens is a really good example of that, because it contains all of those factors. So I think that's the problem, and we are working with them. They have severely reduced their team in the area. 3 years ago, they reduced their team significantly because of the viability challenges in bringing forward any of the schemes. But maybe Open Scrutiny might want to look at the relationship with BDC and have BDC in for a meeting in the future. That might be worth doing. But we are in close contact with them. We do understand the agenda. They understand our agenda to get some development as soon as possible. It is viability that's causing the real issues for them. So.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And sorry to come back in again, although it will not surprise anybody here to know how much I care about regeneration. But I couldn't let the last few points go without raising some serious concerns. I mentioned earlier on that my view anyway, regeneration is about so much more than building homes. It is about includes in the title, it's about helping to regenerate your area. And Bournemouth Town Centre is the case in point. I think we can all pretty much agree that Bournemouth Town Centre needs saving. It's becoming quite sad in many ways, and yet it has so much potential. And we have a real key role in that as a local authority, because we've got a number of key sites in that area. So our focus on regeneration should be I think in Bournemouth Town Centre. How can it help to save Bournemouth Town Centre? Now, we know that actually the Winter Gardens car park is full, a tremendous amount of the time, despite the very high prices at the moment. And you heard from Councillor Beasley some concerns about the impact that it's had because of the car parking income. And yet what we've heard from the Chief Exec and others is that there's now a potential concerted effort to remove public parking requirements at one of the most popular sites to enable and facilitate something to happen there. And I just think we need to be really, really careful. There is a reason that when BDC was created, a number of us were around at that time, that there was a cast iron protection from the administration at the time to maintain public parking in the town centre. And it's because whilst we have lots of lofty and noble ideas about the climate and multimodal transport, which we all agree with, the reality is it is a major town centre, we are a major tourist resort, and we need good quality and hopefully affordable public parking. So a rush to get rid of public parking in order to facilitate homes is very, very worrying in my view. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily we're going to get rid of all of it from what I've heard, but I'd really urge a strong consideration about the necessity of public parking in the mix as we move forward. I hope that will be part of the next series of work. We're not going to resolve it tonight, but I would just put the marker down. The public will not forgive us if we would dramatically remove public parking in central Bournemouth. We need to save Bournemouth Town Centre, not hurt it even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
That was a really, really strange way to get an agenda into this, which is currently not on the agenda. This is not a rush to get rid of public parking. That is a ridiculous way of describing it. This is about regeneration and how we look at what is viable for that particular site. And like I said, there are some significant issues if we were to take away public parking from that site. We need people to come in and park. We need to collect the money for it to, underpin our revenue budget a lot of the time. And I think it is a drastic leap to go from talking about regeneration of a site and what is possible and what is needed in the town centre all the way to accusing this administration of rushing into getting rid of public parking. I think that's a bit unfair.
I think
Chairman,
that we're
could I directly respond to that, if I may?
I just say I think we're straying from the
we're
actual
absolutely
business.
not. We're absolutely not, because I was
Yeah.
responding to the Chief Exec's remarks that the reason that BDC are looking at this site again
Exactly.
is because
So,
we can. It's
Councillor
more
Broadhead-
viable if we get rid of more public parking. That was my only
Councillor
point.
Broadhead, you've made your point. That's fine. And I would just suggest to both we don't have to agree on everything, but it's a good idea if all the points that come forward from all the councillors go in to the office, into the mix, and then you think about them and see whether you think they're viable or you can include them. So there have been lots of comments from different committee members today, and I hope all of those will be something that you will at least bear in mind, even if you don't end up doing them, because they're maybe not in line with what the administration wants, and that's fair enough. So if there is nobody else, I would like to. Councillor Wilson, did you want to say something?
No, I was just indicating that Councillor Bartlett did.
Hey, Councillor Bartlett, I didn't see your hand there.
Sorry, I just wanted to say another thank you to Amina, because she's probably feeling, after this fairly robust debate, that, for us will not go unnoticed, but they do, and I wanted to say thank you for producing the paper, which did actually answer all of the questions that we put, and so thanks very much for helping to generate this debate.
Okay, so I'm going to move that we note the report, that we hope that the officers and the administration will take into account the different comments and just look at how you want to use them. And also, I would like to suggest that we do put an update on our work plan, so that at some point in our work plan, we'll ask for an update on this when you've got more detail, so that we can see how things are going. And to thank you for all the work that you've done on this. Councillor Beasley, did you want to?
Yes, I did, Chair. I fully support the recommendation that you have just recited. It differs in terms of one word from that's in the paper, and I would fully support what you have said. Where it differs is in the first recommendation, where it says the board supports the strategic direction, rather than what you suggested, which is the board notes the strategic direction. I am fully supportive and would like to be supportive of the recommendations, but only on the basis that it is notes rather than supports. And it is important. It is important for the reasons that I have set out, because I think so much depends, do we support or do we not? We can't say that until we get a further report coming back later.
Let me explain why I chose the word note instead of the word support. I chose it because I feel that there isn't a consensus amongst the committee, and I feel that some people are in support of the direction very much, and some people are not in support of the direction. And rather than having a vote, which would probably go along party lines, it's better for us as a committee to come to a consensus of something that's a little bit more neutral. So we're supporting the work that's being done, but we're acknowledging that some people in the committee support the strategic direction and some people don't, and you'd expect that from a scrutiny committee. But our job is scrutiny. It's not to decide whether the administration is doing the right thing or not. So that is why I've chosen the word notes. It's not to say that we don't support it. It's in no way saying we don't support it, okay? But it's saying that we can't, if we're not coming to a consensus, then we will note the report, okay? Is everyone happy with that? Okay, thank you. So our last item on the agenda is the forward plan. The forward plan is not on your agenda papers for this meeting because we deferred it from the last meeting. So you can find it on the agenda papers for the last meeting. If you're looking for that, you can find it. I can't remember how I found it. How did I find it?
So, Chair, just to confirm, if you are on the Modern Gov app, you just go back into ONS board and you should be able to bring up past meetings. It is also published on the external website. But while I'm talking, Chair, can I just confirm, because it's not on the agenda, you're happy to deal with this as a matter of urgency for the reasons that you've given?
Yes. Are you happy to deal with this matter? Yes. Okay. So, it's actually page 365 where we've got the actual work plan, and we have covered all the things for this meeting. Next meeting is going to be our budget scrutiny meeting, and there is some choice of what we can choose to consider. Obviously, we do need to consider the actual budget proposals. We could decide to put in the budget monitoring for Q3 as well. And we could, if we wanted to, decide to scrutinise the housing revenue account. My feeling is that we should not do those extra things in that meeting, that we should leave the budget monitoring till the next meeting, and that we should only consider the housing revenue account if we think we're going to add something to it. It will be a long meeting just doing the budget proposals. So I think if we have just one meeting to concentrate on, that will be a good thing. Does anyone wish to disagree with me? Councillor Waite.
Yeah, thank you. My understanding was that we got ourselves into a bit of a cash flow situation because we overran on the housing revenue account, or spent a little bit too quickly. So I think that I might be wrong, but I do think that's something that's worth looking into.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I mean, did we have? I
you want to bring in? Shall I repeat it?
Can I just bring? The question was, has the cash flow problem that we're in been to do with the housing revenue count? It was my understanding. I thought it was to do with the schools budget. But Lindsay, do you know?
Just to advise on the budget items.
Or
Chair, I don't know if it might be more appropriate to speak to the Chief Executive on that matter.
Well, if you could leave it with us to check. If if there has been a problem with the housing revenue account. Oh, yes.
Sorry, no, the direct answer to that question, no, there isn't a problem with the housing revenue account. The cash flow issue is one of the council using its cash to support the special education needs expenditure, which is unbudgeted by government.
Lindsay might be able to give you of the budget items.
I don't know whether it was this committee or A&G where Adam said that you know, we gave him the target of, you know, properties to repurchase under we think we were buying back things that had been sold under right to buy, and then they almost did a bit too well or kind of hit their target quite quickly, and maybe that's sort of been and gone. I mean, I might be talking about something 9 months ago now, but you know what.
Sorry, no, I can answer that. So it's Adam was flagging the fact that we've had to use all of the available cash in the council's accounts to fund the SEND expenditure. And if we spend money on housing acquisition over and above the budget, then that would make that situation worse in terms of cash flow. And we reach a point when we would effectively run out of cash within the council because we're constantly paying out into a budget which is not being funded coming in. So there's a limit to that. So what he was flagging was that all of the council's budgets in terms of cash expenditure could become constrained. We haven't constrained spending yet, but at some point during next year it could be. But we are in very active dialogue with government and MHCLG, and we believe we found a potential solution which will allow us to set a balanced budget and sort out the cash flow. Although there is a price to that, and it's complex, but we believe that there's potentially a solution in the offing. So we've had conversation with government. I mean, literally last Friday, I think, or Thursday was the last conversation. So we're solving that. If we don't solve it, then there is a danger that we could have to stop big spending because of the cash flow issue.
So, Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue about the housing may be getting confused with the housing acquisition programme fund, which is funded outside of the housing revenue account. And we discussed it at a couple of meetings ago. With regards to what we put on the agenda, Chair, I think it is important that we see the budget outturn for Q3. One of the things that Mr. Richards agreed to was to present the capital report at that outturn report. And if you remember, there was an action for it to be presented at the last outturn report, and it wasn't. And Mr. Richards agreed to provide it with the outturn report for Q3. I personally really would like to see that. It does have some bearing, I think, on what's happening next year with the budget. So I would like to see it.
So you'd like to see it before the budget?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Trent.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, because I've sort of had a lot of engagement in the past with the housing revenue account, and it's very much its own ecosystem. It's totally separate to the rest of the council. It's ring fenced. You know, it's basically what tenants pay in rent, and anything the government gives directly to it gets sort of paid out. And I know it's a pity Adam's not here actually, because it was almost about 34 years ago, I kind of raised it at a meeting when the government was actually taking money out of the housing revenue account. And I described it as a tax on rent. And there was a sudden sort of realisation on Adam's face, because he was the advisor to the housing revenue account then. He's right, it's true. And that became a major issue since then. And it got
Tony, can you
sorted.
just say, are you arguing that we should have it on the agenda for next meeting or not?
Well, it depends whether we've got any concerns about it, but it's something that concerns the tenants. It's a loop, it's within itself, so it doesn't actually affect what the rest of the council does, but it affects obviously the service that the tenants get. So, you know, I think the Chief Executive has kind of touched on where it might be getting confused with something, because, you know, the council obviously has a desire to get more sort of houses there, and that's where you get a slight crossing of the lines. But unless there's a concern, I don't know whether it needs to be looked at specifically.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you. And look, I agree that the HRA is largely separate. So I think we can look at that perhaps another time if need be, or at all from a scrutiny point of view. But I would agree with Councillor Bartlett's point about the relative urgency of the budget monitoring report, and both the budget monitoring and the budget are due to go to Cabinet on the 5th of February, and we are arranging our scrutiny at around that time to look at those those papers are being looked at by Cabinet. And whilst I understand your concerns that putting them both into the one meeting might occupy more time, I think we've done it before, and the reality is they kind of flow into one another. The situation and how the council is doing on the outturn and the budget monitoring largely flavour the choices that go into the budget. So I don't think it's an absolute huge extra burden to put onto the committee. The consequence, of course, of putting it onto the next one is that it's kind of old news by then as well. So I'm pretty sure that we can accommodate both of those papers. So if we had a budget finance special meeting dealing with the outturn and the budget together, I'm sure that we can get through it with as little pain as possible. Famous last words.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on that? I'm going to suggest in that case that we cover the Q3 budget monitoring first, followed by budget scrutiny at the next meeting, and we don't do the housing revenue account for now. And we'll just see if maybe we look at it later. Okay? Is it? Oh yes. And I'd like to invite the chairs of all the ONS committees to come along for the budget meeting. I think that's quite helpful. I think a lot of them attend anyway, but it's good to invite them to come along to, in case there's any questions or comments on their area. Everyone agreed that? Okay. Is there anything else we need to cover today? No. So if there's nothing else, meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone.